I don't know if teams necessarily want AI. I think that they want their jobs to be easier and to deliver a better product through the customers.
I don't know that everybody has the preparation and the diligence and the experience to deploy it.
Well, isn't that the same as machine learning? What's the difference between machine learning and most of that doesn't matter to people. They just want
the outcome.
They want a faster human-to-human connection. They want a better result.
Processes and workflows and standard operating procedures that you're trying to put in, it's not just automation, it's optimization, right? You want to be able to say, okay, this is what we do. This is what we do well. Now, how do we improve upon that by having a process? This is just an extension of having good process.
Welcome, everybody. Charlie Dolan here with my older and better brother, Brian, here to talk to you about the 2026 Waste Management Tech Trends Report, which will be coming out. And we want to run through some highlights of that, talk about what we're seeing in the market, both within waste and how AI is being used there, and then also more broadly and how that's developing, including how it's working for us as a software company. So without further ado, I want to run through some high points here. And obviously at the tail end of this video and in some of the links, you'll be able to find the full Tech Trends report, which is coming out now. So I want to touch on some high points that hit this. First one being about 75% of respondents are saying that they're now using AI weekly. I think that's a big trend from when we did this for the first time last year. Tools were not as developed and not as much utility really gained out of them. And even almost half, 45%, are saying that they have some daily use case for it. I think a lot of those are probably still geared in a ChatGPT type of interface, and maybe not into deeper ends of the workflow. But I thought that was an impressive gain from where this was last year, where it was kind of more of a parlor trick, a tool to kind of see, oh, that's interesting. But I think people
a lot of cat memes.
A lot of cat memes. So I think that if you thought of this as a tech adoption kind of graph, there's definitely a maturing, I think, that's going on since, some of this ChatGPT stuff came out in 2023. I think that maturing is still a little bit slow, though. I know we've seen some use cases from different parts of the industry. Any ones that you want to highlight, either within waste or outside of it?
Well, I think using our own example is probably most applicable. We can speak to how we're using it, because how you and I use AI is entirely different. Right? You're using it for a much more deterministic, code-based environment. I'm using it for, I was working on a commission plan the other day. And so I had that in the system, looking at it, saying, okay, how do I make this better? What do I want to adjust? What am I missing? What did I forget?
Yeah.
What holes are there? What inconsistencies did I, contradict myself? And so that's very useful for that. But that's it supplementing my brain. You're using it, from my experience, to be much more of a duplication of efforts, a multiplication of efforts.
Yeah, I think so. Let's break those into two kind of parts. What can you use AI for daily that's maybe lower risk, and use it almost as a, coworker sitting next to you working through the problem? And I think I think that's probably the best use case for it right now, which is, help me think of some, new ideas. Not that it's necessarily going to have new ideas, but it might be able to prompt you for something.
Something you might have forgotten. Right.
It might be able to edit, a paragraph, a sentence, modify a commission plan to match maybe what it's seen in its training data.
I had an example. I had a typo. I said one thing would be 1.1 here, and it would be 1.2 there.
Right.
And I needed to correct that typo. And, when you read a document 10 times, you might overlook that.
Don't you think that those are the situations that people get frustrated with AI, though, and think that it's not good at what it is being asked to do? Like those general onesie-twosie kind of, hey, can you do something for me? And it's giving back a generic answer.
I don't know in that case, because this was a very specific use. I was using it. Its purpose was very specific.
I guess I'm just touching on, I think there's been, and we see this in last year's and this year's Tech Trends report, a lower level of trust on this so far, right? And it's kind of like, is this actually going to be helpful? Is it giving me anything that I can rely on? I think one thing that we stressed internally was at the time we would say, don't trust this to do any math calculation whatsoever.
Yeah, I wasn't asking it to do math. I was asking it to do error checking in terms of, is there logical consistency? But I agree that there's an underpinning, and we see that in the results of the survey, that people aren't necessarily willing to trust this. I think part of that, though, is that there's a certain amount of a distrust in how people use it themselves. They look at themselves and say, I'm not exactly sure how to use this best.
It's a new tool. Not exactly sure the best way to get the use out of it. And I think, so let's bucket that into kind of daily coworker next to you, you're delegating some work to them and getting some feedback on it. And I think that the part of the reason that is not met with such resounding, wow, this really solved my problem, is because the guardrails that are available for people are not that awesome to get the outputs that you want.
Meaning they're too tight?
No, meaning it's way too broad in what the LLM will give you. This thing was trained, and most of these have been trained, and now they're getting better at training them. But like the fundamental thing was it just scraped the internet.
Yeah.
So you're getting very generic answers back from, chat rooms, Stack
Reddit
Overflow, Reddit, whatever. And so when you ask it, hey, can you help me with this business problem? It's maybe going to give you some Harvard Business Review, high quality content. It's also going to maybe give you something from a chat room of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
Bunch of 14-year-olds, right?
And so I think that, that's the generic vanilla version of a response that you might get from AI that I think is getting better. But the way to really take control of that in your own world is to try to, what we've been pushing people to do and doing ourselves, document everything that you can and use the LLMs and their ability to generate more content from, multimodal inputs. So you could load in a recording of a team meeting that you had. You could load in a transcript from phone calls. You can load in all the old documentation that you had that's gotten out of date and stale, that's sitting in your Google Drive or SharePoint, and create your own sort of Bible or source of truth for how your company wants to run. And that then gets used as sort of those guide rails and that way to steer a language model to give you the answer that you want. Here's the structured output I want when it's a customer service complaint that comes in, as one example.
So there's a truism that is, if you're only relying on the average of everybody else, if you're doing the same thing everybody else is doing, you'll get the same average outcome. So if you're putting the effort in to have good standard operating procedures, have good documentation, put it into a home where the system understands your business uniquely, now you're leveling up above the average of what the internet spits out.
Right. Use cases that people are using AI in still seems like, that unstructured front end data, like customer inputs, whether that's a phone call, an email, some sort of service request. That seems to still be, I think, where both in the waste industry and more broadly, where that's having a lot of success.
Didn't we see one of the guys we follow out there, Hoffman out of St. Louis? He introduced an AI customer service calling, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like call routing for inbound phone calls.
Inbound phone. His customer service agent essentially is receiving the phone call coming in after hours.
Yeah. I think it does it during hours too, but definitely after hours for sure.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting use case. So just on the background of that, it's a large HVAC company. And they, I think, saw a drop off in either calls that were totally answered and or just the time to answer the call and get somebody that is calling in contact with a human to take a schedule.
Speed to response was one of the things that they were most critical on, I thought.
And so that was I think they started that in 2024. He said a long-term project to get the AI to, follow the rules that his business has around how to handle those. And that is a lot of scheduling complexity and which type of service does they offer many. How is the AI going to route that to the right area? How is it going to fill out the information in their back-end system correctly? And also hopefully not let the customer on the other end of the phone necessarily know that it's an AI. Not that they might hang up if they found out that it was, but they want the experience to be so good that they're excited to use it and it wasn't seen as a friction point.
And ultimately their goal is to get from a computer interaction to a human interaction as quickly as possible, because even in HVAC where it's my furnace is down, there's still an amount of triage that has to go on from a human to human at some point.
Yeah. Right.
So I found that pretty interesting that that's a limited use case, but with a very specific outcome they're trying to achieve.
Right. And again, done by getting all of their specific scenarios documented and then going through training iterations of, okay, let's run through a dry run of a phone call and go through those steps and see if the AI routes us to the right place. If it doesn't, what could we change in our documentation so that it would have a better idea of where to route me on the next phone call?
Well, that lines up with two of our things that we saw from this is that people are trying to get rid of manual data entry, which, has been our purpose here for a decade or more. And then they're trying to find not just, I think that the thing that maybe we can put into succinct words when you talk about processes and workflows and standard operating procedures that you're trying to put in, it's not just automation, it's optimization, right? You want to be able to say, okay, this is what we do. This is what we do well. Now, how do we improve upon that by having a process? This is just an extension of having good process.
Right. No, it definitely is. And
It's not a replacement for having good process.
no, it will give you a generic answer without a good process, which is not going to be what you want for your company. And I think that the other benefit how these AIs work is it can kind of be a double check, and you can have it in some cases set it up where, depending upon how your workflows work, you can have it reread presentations that are going to be given or emails that have gone out or sift through information that you might not necessarily have the human capacity to go do, and let it, sort of raise its hand of this might be a problem or this might come up later as an issue, and have it kind of double check your work. Not unlike the example that you're using at the beginning of, you're using it to just iterate on documents that you need to get through the day, but now do that at scale across the team to catch, maybe some inconsistencies or where things aren't meeting the standard process across a larger group.
Yeah. Well, when we look ahead, it seems like teams want AI. People, it's not a fad, even though it had a faddish phase.
There was a hype cycle.
There was definitely a hype cycle. But I don't know that everybody has the preparation and the diligence and the experience to deploy it. Right? When I look at the customers that we're onboarding, many of them are coming from either lesser softwares or more manual processes. And they're really looking to us to say, okay, how do I employ this in my world? What is this? How do I use, is this part of what is offered in your package? And how's this work for me? And so I think there's an ongoing gap in what people want and what they can effect on their own. And I do think there is an ongoing need in the marketplace that will be filled by third parties, by companies like us that say, okay, here's how we can help you deploy that.
Yeah. And I think that, we've said this before, it comes down to picking partners that have APIs available, have the ability for you to get your data in an interface that AI can use.
Yes, if you are out there and you're watching this and you don't have an API, we welcome you to start creating one.
Right. But I guess I would maybe be pedantic about one thing. I don't know if teams necessarily want AI. I think that they want their jobs to be easier and to deliver a better product through the customers. And I think that AI is it's kind of a big word. Not that it's, it's two letters, but I think if you asked a bunch of people, what is AI, you'd get a lot of different answers. I think you might even get answers of well, isn't that the same as machine learning? What's the difference between machine learning? And most of that doesn't matter to people. They just want
the outcome.
They want a faster human to human connection. They want a better result.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there's a learning curve there around, how is this technology different than what was available before? And it is very, very different. So there's a lot to, spool up on there. But as much as it is different, I think the underlying need is still the same of deliver a better product, make our lives.
It's interesting you say that. I go back in my era. I remember when the iPhone came out, when the BlackBerry came out. I'm old enough to remember when the cell phone came out in the car. And there is an element, though, addition to what you're saying of the outcome people want. Some people do just want the fancy piece of tech, right? They want they want to be seen with the tangerine iPhone this year that was the color?
Yeah,
right?
It was orange.
Right. Before that, it was purple or gray. I think there is an element also, and we've seen it in some of the fundraising world, where people add the word AI onto their webpage and all of a sudden they can raise an extra $1 billion. That there is an element of wanting to be seen, perceived as being on the cutting edge of technology. Yep. So even if they're not necessarily using it fully or even well, they want to be seen having it. So I think both.
We'll say we're both right.
I think you're both true. I think they're both true. So the last bit in my mind is that I think that from where we sit in our world, the biggest thing we see coming is that some of these legacy processes and systems are what's going to be challenged most by this over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think that the difficulty, if you're not documenting stuff, having software tools, processes that these AI generative LLMs can interface with, is that it's almost like being offline. You're going to miss out in a way. And I think that that's important to be kind of taking as an inventory of your own business. And, we have stuff that's intentionally offline. We have stuff that we'd prefer to be better network connected, and thinking through those to determine if we want to make any changes there. And I think everybody should be kind of looking at that, because, you can have these do a lot of great, powerful things for you that is way faster than you being able to speak or even type into a computer, or have 10 people speak and type into their computers and figure something out. But you have to have the right, structure, guardrails, guideposts, documentation, understanding for this to know how to navigate your systems.
And quality control.
And quality control to be able to make it have an impact for you. And that goes along with the worst type of automation is automation of stuff that you don't want. That just makes
multiplied garbage is bad.
Right.
Still more garbage.
Right. So, I think that one thing I would say for next year, it says it's 75% of people using it weekly, 45% are using it daily. I would imagine both of those numbers are 80% above, even if it's on the daily use case, something small. I believe that most products that people are using are going to have some integration with this, where they're getting a continued benefit daily out of it. Whether that's something as simple as like Siri getting better and they feel like, okay, I'm actually using an aspect of that that's better for my day-to-day work, or the primary, single source of truth applications that they're using.
I wonder how many people are going to be aware that they're using an AI if the companies accomplish what you were saying, which is people aren't necessarily aware that they're using it. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time.
Right.
Okay. Well, take us home.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. This is the second Tech Trends annual report, and take a look for the 2026 Waste Management Tech Trends report.
And look out for Waste Nexus being announced in January.
If it is.
Yeah. I think we'll announce it in January.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, and have a good one.